We are at the point where software solutions can think, act, and importantly, collaborate, not just execute things. It's not explicit instruction anymore. Welcome to the Agentic Edge, the podcast where we explore the frontier of AI agents, enterprise orchestration, and the architectures that are shaping tomorrow's intelligent AI-driven enterprises. My name is Micah Smith, and I'm the host for this series. But today, I'm going to be the one in the hot seat because to launch this brand new podcast, we're going to be diving deep into agentic process automation, what it is, why it matters, why now, and what you need to know. And I'm joined by my co-host, Kate Ressler. And she's here to challenge me, explore, and unpack everything related to agentic process automation. Kate, welcome.
Yeah, I am so glad to be launching this with you. We have a lot to talk about today, so I'm going to jump right in. Since 2023, it's been all AI all the time.
On everything.
Literally everything. You log into LinkedIn, it's like, AI is destroying the world. AI is going to save your company.
AI is destroying LinkedIn.
That is actually maybe true. You scroll through the news, you also read a lot of headlines. In fact, I pulled one because I am indeed a news junkie. You know this about me. So despite this hyper focus and actually quite a bit of enthusiasm over the last 2 years, I think what I'm seeing lately is some headlines around that early AI investments have not panned out yet. I'm going to say yet because I do believe they will. And pilots are unfortunately being abandoned at a really high rate. So here's the quote from the Fortune article. Only 25% of AI initiatives have delivered expected ROI over the past 3 years, according to a new report from IBM, which surveyed 2,000 CEOs around the world during the first quarter of 2025. Okay, that context. So what makes now the moment for APA, and how is that going to make a difference with actually making AI do the work that it's promised us that it would do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's unfortunate that so many organizations are struggling to achieve the outcomes that they've intended to with AI and agentic automation. Taking a step back, right? Agentic automation or agentic process automation, as we've been calling it, I think is the response to that gap. A lot of organizations say that they have moved forward with AI, but what they've actually implemented are just chatbots or personal assistants that, in my mind, drive limited value for an organization. I had a friend that went to consult for a large organization, and he said that they told him going in, we've got tons of AI agents. We're just trying to bring them all together. And what he found in uncovering through some conversations with him was that while they said they had tons of agents, what they actually had were a bunch of chatbots, right? They built all of these chatbots that would let them answer questions about documents, respond to their requests, but nothing that was actually driving any meaningful change within the organization or meaningful outcomes that the organization valued, right? So it's more personal productivity. It's not actually enterprise change. And I think that's where a lot of organizations are missing this. Departmentally, we could implement a chatbot that might give a lift for 4 or 5 people on that team or in that department. But the organizations that are really succeeding right now are those that are looking at this more holistically. How do I implement AI to augment enterprise processes being the key term here, right? End to end, not just individual tasks and not just personal productivity. It seems like every organization that has Microsoft licensing probably also has Copilot. But how many people are actually effectively using Copilot to even drive any kind of enterprise value beyond just personal productivity use cases or beyond just answering questions for, hey, make this slide better or write this talk track? Those things are great. Don't get me wrong, but they don't drive enterprise change.
Got it. Yeah, I agree.
That would have been really awkward if you disagreed with an answer for the very first question, right? Totally disagree. And here's why.
Completely disagree.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's keep going and dig into kind of APA. Like I mentioned, we're seeing AI everywhere. And even more confusing, even as somebody who's in the industry, if you will, you hear AI agents all the time. To someone not in the AI weeds, I think this is probably even more confusing, or they just don't even know that there is potentially a difference between different AI agents. It's kind of like the Coke versus Pepsi in the 90s, which arguably there is a difference between Coke and Pepsi, but that's a different point. I want to make sure that the conversation we're having today is not Coke versus Pepsi. So let's start with a clear definition of what agentic process automation really is.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And we mentioned something at the beginning of this conversation that there's been so much what I would call AI whitewashing, right? There's
Yeah.
AI on everything. Everyone says they are an AI company now. Every company has some agentic play. We've been very intentional with the definition of agentic process automation. But before we actually explain the definition of agentic process automation, let's take a look at the three words there, right? Agent. What would you define as an agent? I would say that it's a multi-step reasoning chain that's capable of some level of autonomy and tool use. And that means that agents can have a goal, they can interpret context, they can make decisions, they can coordinate actions across multiple tools, multiple systems, other agents, or even processes. Process is the next word, right? Agentic process, a sequence of triggered steps by some input to produce a defined outcome. Something happens on the input and something happens on the output of a process. And these processes exist literally everywhere. Every organization has processes, from onboarding a new employee to customer support issues where we get an email from a customer who needs help on a thing, to seeking some resolution or some answer to their question. These processes oftentimes will span one or more systems. Usually it's multiple systems, multiple people, and there's also a data and decision component to those different processes. They don't always exist in a linear fashion. It's not do step 1, step 2, then step 3, and then it's always step 4. There's a lot of variation to these processes. And when we think about the number of systems involved, the number of decisions, the number of departments, they can get really complex. The final word in our definition here is automation. And this is the execution of tasks or processes by software. And that could be across APIs, which are application programming interfaces. That could be against UIs or user interfaces, the same things that you and I use to interact with a web application or a thick client application. Or it could be through things like system connectors. Without human intervention, though, is a key phrase to automation, right? Because by definition, it isn't automated if a human is the one doing it. So automation helps to replace those manual steps within our processes. And that could be filling out a form, that could be calling an API to get some kind of data or doing a lookup, that could be interfacing with a terminal application. Those terminal apps still run a large majority of banking organizations behind the scenes. So it could be doing that, or it could even be processing and interfacing with a document. If we put those three key phrases together, that gives us our definition for agentic process automation, or what we've been calling APA. So we want to think of this as really the orchestration of processes, automations, and AI agents that are able to think through complex business problems. They're able to extend on automation capabilities, enabling them to do more than the automation could do on its own. They're able to coordinate across systems and people, which is a key consideration here. And they're able to take action to achieve specific outcomes, right? We talked about at the beginning that agents are goal-oriented. That means that there is some outcome we're trying to achieve. Our process has some trigger and it has some endpoint, some goal that it's trying to achieve. So when we bring those things together, we're really blending together the cognitive capabilities of AI with the kind of deterministic execution that exists with processes and automation.
Okay.
Super long definition.
Yeah. Okay. If I were to super dumb this down, is APA more or less combining automation software with AI models like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, etc.?
It's some of that, but it's some of the process that's in between, right? Because that process is really key to this being enterprise grade solutioning, right? If all I think about is a chat interface plus an automation, there's only so much I can do, right? That's a fire off, go do the automation, and then come back. When I'm thinking about an end-to-end orchestrated process, I'm thinking about all of the different steps that exist in between, all of the different systems, how they're all connected, how that data has to stream from system to system, where they may have different pieces of data that need to be connected, and then how I ultimately drive to that outcome. So is it more than just bolting on AI to a process or to an automation? I think absolutely, because those automations can also use AI, right? And we'll talk about some examples here in a little bit, but let's say that I'm monitoring an inbox. That's my trigger for my process. AI can help my automation to read data from that email, which might include named entity recognition. It might be classification. It might be sentiment analysis, which enables me to have some information to make a key decision in my process, which guides me on which system I could go to, who I need to invoke. Maybe it's I need to send this to a user because the person's really upset, or they explicitly ask that they need to talk to a human. So those kind of things can help drive decisioning within my process. But my agent is the one orchestrating all of that.
Yeah, let's dig into processes a little bit more.
Yeah, let's
We've
talk about it.
been, yeah, so for decades, arguably, like this is the backbone of SaaS, B2B SaaS companies. Automating processes has been like a key goal for digital transformation. Sounds like we're headed in a different direction, sort of, or and maybe our journey is just continuing. But can you walk us through what that journey has really been from where we were with basic workflow automation to where we're going with APA?
Yeah, I think it's an important distinction, and I look at this as the next evolution. This is what we've been waiting for, right? If you look at software in, let's say, the late 90s, early 2000s, you ended up with a lot of applications that were in silos. They really didn't have a way to talk to each other well. And so department A uses application 1, department B uses application 2, but they really didn't have a way to communicate. Some applications had application programming interfaces that would enable them to talk to other applications, or they had a database that they would use to expose the data and the transactions that they have. But largely, those organizations would have these applications that existed in silos. And where traditional automation came into play was it enabled us to really create connections between these different applications in the form of processes and tasks that didn't previously exist, right? So if I've got a workflow application, maybe it doesn't talk to my IDP system, or maybe it doesn't talk to this other application within my organization. And we would create these automations that would enable us to basically glue these things together. But those automations largely just mimicked what humans were doing. So if it's a swivel chair operation where I'm taking data from system A and then I'm going and pasting all of those fields into system B or to system C, that's really just mimicking what a user was already doing. So we alleviated that. But then the next level of maturity came with automations, where we started to integrate more APIs as applications made those available. We also started to integrate AI. So at this point, I would say that's kind of a generation 2 evolution of AI and automation, where we're starting to inject some level of intelligence to our processes, but at the same time, they're largely automation driven. It was like AI as a sidecar. So if we think about something like IDP, where I'm starting to do some OCR, I'm extracting some data from a document, that enables me to do some basic AI within my process. I also have the ability to, build and train my own ML models, right? And I could have done that, dating back to 2014 or earlier even. But I could build my own AI models and combine that with automation to help it make better decisions. A great use case of that is I actually had used H2O.ai to build an ML model that would help me evaluate loans in peer-to-peer lending. I don't know that I've ever talked about this before.
I know I have not heard this one before.
So in peer-to-peer lending, they had this ability where you would go and you could invest in a loan that someone was looking for, right? So if I want a loan for a new car, I would put that loan up on this peer-to-peer lending platform, and people could invest in a part of it or the whole loan itself. And what was predetermined was all of the information about me as the person who's getting the loan. What's my credit score? What's my justification for the loan? What am I buying? How much it is? All this kind of stuff. And on the other end of that is someone who's looking to invest in this loan. But those loans could have a high rate of default. And so they would pay out at different rates based on that person's credit worthiness. So I built this model based on all of the historical data from this lending platform to basically tell me as I'm building these automations to evaluate loans, which ones have the lowest probability of defaulting and which ones I should invest in. Because what I'm looking for is a diamond in the rough, right? So that was a good use case of automation that's powered by some decisioning that's done by AI. But it meant that I had to go and build that ML model myself. I had to have lots of data that was available to me. And then I had to tie that together with my automation to be able to make that intelligent decision to populate what are the top loans I need to be going for. Did it work? We'll save that for another episode.
Yeah, I think this is also it's going to be in this series, right? Is like all of the weird Micah use cases that exist.
All the Micah builds. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say that that's kind of a Gen 2 automation. It's still really task oriented though, right? I could
Mhm.
string a bunch of these things together, but it's largely task oriented. Now we're in a new era, and I would say this is a Gen 3, where we're starting to combine the intelligence and the autonomy of AI with the orchestration capabilities and the end to end process capabilities of automation. So at this point, our APA agents are, and our solutions, I would say, are goal oriented, they're context aware, they're capable of using tools to understand what should run next. Like the email example that I brought in before, right? If we're monitoring a shared inbox for, let's say, IT support requests, I'm going to go with that because it's a well understood use case. Someone could send in an email to that inbox and they say, hey, I need help because one of my monitors isn't working. We know that that is a hardware request, right? We may know what kind of monitor that person has assigned to them based on our inventory management stuff. So we can now start to use AI to help us with that decisioning. But the step that comes next can be determined by the agent. It could be that I need to go do some more investigation on this model, this make of monitor to give them some guidance on how it might be fixed. Maybe not a great example because I don't know if you can fix monitors that easily, but stick with me here, right? So AI is able to go and identify what needs to be the next step in this process. And it won't always be the same because the next time that a request comes in and someone says, hey, I need access to this one video editing tool, that's a different kind of request. And AI is able to recognize that. AI is able to invoke the correct tools in the right order with that context to get to the goal of ultimately satisfying this person's request. So that's where I think APA is differentiated from kind of the approaches that we had previously. We now have the ability to understand that context, use the tools that have already been built, and then move on to what is ultimately getting me to that goal.
Okay, so I know you said this is where we were kind of always headed. Are we still is this the peak of the mountain, if you will, or is this just another stop in the journey? What do you think?
I think we've always kind of had those use cases where we said, this will work for now, but it would be great if we could do this. Or we would say, yeah, but what if we could go a little bit further, right? And just like with those emails, understanding the context of the email, knowing what's in it, not having people send in these very rigid emails that says, hey, make sure you always follow this exact format where it's like thing::thing so that my automation can read it. Now we have a lot more flexibility to interact with these agents using natural language and be able to take advantage of all the things that we've been building. So is this the peak? No, but I think a real key distinction would be all the things that we've been building up until this point become tools that that agent can use. So when I've been building those automations that can go and talk to my Salesforce system or can talk to my Workday application or can talk to whatever CRM application we're using, those become tools that my agents can now use. And so now, when I think about the benefit of reusability, the benefit of those assets that I already have, those things become assets that my agents can now take advantage of to solve problems. In addition to all of the other tools that become available when we think about things like MCP and agent interoperability, where we can have tool use for our agents, where they can take advantage of other third-party agents or other MCP servers that are available to them to solve these problems.
You're getting into the weeds a little bit, and we'll get there. But I want to maybe address one of the controversies around AI, and that's that it's potentially decimating jobs. I think we all probably agree that the workforce we have today broadly is not what we're going to see in 5 years or 10 years. What's your view on the relationship between AI agents and human team members and how that might impact how our workforce takes shape over time?
This is obviously $1 million question. If someone was able to really answer this well, they would probably not be me. No, I have an opinion here. I read quite a bit about this, and I think that there's a wide spectrum of perspectives that we see online. There are people who are like David Shapiro, who says that we will all become useless eaters and that AI will just look down on us because we no longer of any value to the world. And that's a really dark future for all of us. There are other people who say that, hey, AI is just a bubble. They point to something like all of the hype that was around GPT-5 and then how it was actually more of like an incremental update than it was a true transformation or a true next step to the promised AGI. People like Gary Marcus will point to hallucinations as a reason why we can't trust LLMs and why they won't be as transformative as we all think. I think that the reality, at least how I see it, is it's somewhere in between. There is a ton of low hanging fruit that even the most basic agents that are leveraging automation capabilities can fully automate. And these aren't moonshots, these are just overdue processes that we still have people doing that need to be automated. I talked some before about a shared inbox triage, things like classification, named entity extraction, routing logic, even response generation. Those kind of things can be transformative for a department or a function to move more quickly into the work that actually matters. If we think about things like onboarding and offboarding exercises or audits, right? It used to be that it would be very expensive to audit 100% of transactions. And so what you might do is say, we're going to audit X% of all of the decisions or transactions made by a specific department and elevate those that we feel like are anomalies. Now I could potentially use an AI agent to audit all of those, whether they're a human decision or a decision made by another agent. And then I can elevate those unusual decisions or those outliers. And I always have the ability within APA to be able to route some of those decisions to a user. So if there is something that's truly an exception or an outlier on an unexpected input, I can always have a human in the loop to review those. And the role of the human is not to just agree with whatever the agent or AI model said, it's to really hold the agent accountable to make sensible, structured decisions based off of the input that was received. So those aren't future use cases. Those are things that are happening now. They're not overly complex. They're not, like I said, moonshots where it's like, how do we even get there? These are reasonable processes that any organization should be thinking about automating right now so that their users can be focused on the right kind of work.
I want to go back to the analogy Coke versus Pepsi that I mentioned earlier. The average consumer watching TV has probably heard about AI agents rescheduling reservations or handling HR issues, people working, remotely. Well, actually, just scratch that. People working in a professional setting are likely getting bombarded with cold pitches about some AI tool or AI agent. How can we broadly understand what the difference is between all these tools, what we're hearing about? Can you tell us about like the technology and make it so we can understand why Automation Anywhere is creating something different for their version of the autonomous enterprise?
Yeah, I think it's really important when anyone is pitching you something that you have some framework for evaluating what that thing is and how it actually solves problems. One thing that we've talked about with different customers is, establishing that standardized framework for being able to evaluate these solutions. And I think about something like, what's the solution adaptability? How well does this solution handle the unexpected? Because real business processes are messy, they can be unpredictable. So I want to make sure and understand how adaptable is this solution to my business processes, my unpredictable mess, right? The next is about automation coverage. If I think about my end-to-end process, how much of that end-to-end process can be automated without human intervention? And that's not saying like, oh, I need to do screen scraping. That's saying within my defined end-to-end process, how does this solution help me to solve all of the problems that I might approach? Some of them might be integrations between systems, some of them might be integrations between users, and some of them might be integrations with data repositories, right? And so I want to understand what kind of automation coverage would I have end to end with my most common processes. The next is being able to define the business impact of that solution. So, what measurable outcomes does this solution deliver for my organization? I don't want to implement technology for technology's sake. And I think kind of what we started the conversation with from that Forbes article was that a lot of organizations have jumped into AI and technology because they want to say we're doing AI, we're implementing AI, we're on the cutting edge, but they're implementing technology for technology's sake, which doesn't drive enterprise transformation. And then finally, the level of autonomy. How intelligently can this solution operate independent of specific instruction? Do I have to tell it every single step of the way, or can it actually execute across systems without that very specific guidance? So that's how I think about those different solutions that I would be evaluating. Now, that gets to why is Automation Anywhere different? And I would say that Automation Anywhere has been building to this point for the last 20 years. That may seem like an exaggeration, but really we're adapting to where software has gone over that time. And we've built something called the process reasoning engine. And the process reasoning engine is the foundational intelligence that's powering a lot of the experiences within our platform. So we can do things like text to automate, where I can describe the kind of automation or the process that I want to build. And based on the anonymized metadata of over 400 million executions trained on things like our community edition, we're able to generate up to 90% of that code accurately without you having to make any changes. And the best part is that it follows common best practices for things like variable naming, handling sessions, and being able to have error handling in your process. So that gives us the ability to have a unique insight into how we can better build automations and build them automatically based on a ton of data that is native to what our solution is able to deliver. We also use the process reasoning engine to power things like our IDP solution. So if you want to automate documents, even unstructured documents, which have commonly been a huge problem for the IDP industry, that's powered by a ton of document extractions that we've trained our model on to be able to understand documents, understand their layouts, and really have a native chunking capability that we've built into the product to be able to understand the document and get to the correct response or the correct answer for any of the individual fields I'm looking to extract as quickly as possible. And like I said, those come from unstructured documents. So if it's a contract or some kind of legal agreement, we can extract that kind of data without any kind of pre-training. It's really just asking a question and getting an answer back from that document. So the process reasoning engine is powering those kind of capabilities. Even things like our computer use agents that we're introducing with some of our customers now, where they can self-navigate web pages and be able to self-navigate around a computer screen, even if they've never seen that application before. Again, it's goal-oriented and it's trained on all of this anonymized process metadata. So it understands these user interfaces with a distinct context.
Okay. I think I'm following with the process reasoning engine. What I want to know is how is it different than what other companies are doing with their AI tools? And why are we investing so much time and effort in building it?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, this is the key differentiator for Automation Anywhere. It is that foundational intelligence layer that powers the entire agentic automation experience. And you're getting something that's distinct to Automation Anywhere that's different than you would get elsewhere. No other organization has the metadata that we have on all of these processes to know how they execute, to know what systems that they work across, to know how to interface with different user interfaces. So that's powering experiences like our generative recorder, which enables us to have higher resiliency on automations. If I'm sticking to screen scraping for certain applications, hey, if that button moves from one side of the page to the other side, or things change in the application layout, those were things that would break traditional automations. But with our generative recorder, we're able to understand that application layout using multimodal models and be able to understand where that button is moved to, make sure that we're clicking the right place, we're entering data in the right field, and we're able to alert the user on changes that may need to be made. I already mentioned our computer use agents that are driving UI applications. We have our AI Agent Studio, which people can build AI agents with high levels of autonomy, those goal-oriented agents like I talked about, our document automation capability, as well as our Copilot for business users, which enables users to interface with all of your automation estate, including your AI agents, including your processes, to really be able to invoke the right process at the right time with all the required data, getting the output that the user is aiming for.
Okay. All right. So we're about 30 minutes in, and I would say that means we're nearing the close. But I want to talk a little bit about this Agentic Edge. What is your take on why we're launching this now, and what are you hoping to achieve with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really a way for Automation Anywhere and specifically our team probably to be able to demonstrate thought leadership in this AI space. There's so much AI fluff, there's so much AI whitewashing. I think it's important that we share a perspective that's unique, that's grounded, that's tangible, that people can learn from, right? We want this to be approachable. We want to expose the decisions we're making, the architecture that we're doing, why we're making these decisions. We're going to have people from our product team on who are going to share what product features they've been working on, why they think it's differentiated, why they're making the decisions that they are, why they're prioritizing the things that they are. All of these people, just like myself, are constantly researching what's next and what's coming for AI and automation. So we want to talk to those thought leaders to understand their perspectives and share that more broadly. I think I also go back to the naming of this podcast itself, right? We're calling it Agentic Edge. And edge has two meanings in my mind. One is a competitive advantage, like having an edge over your competition, over your peers. And we want that for the people who are listening to this podcast regularly. Edge also means on the frontier, and that's about pushing the boundaries on the edge of what's possible. And we're definitely doing that here at Automation Anywhere. And I think it's good that we bring greater visibility to that. It also pushes me to the edge, right? I've got to learn about all of these new topics and be able to share a perspective that's thoughtful, that's grounded, and that's tangible, right? I don't want this to be a marketing podcast. This is a podcast about sharing what's real and what you can do in this industry with this software and with complementary tools.
Yeah, I'm particularly excited to have you interview not only our product leaders, but some of our engineers, because I think you're going to help us decode some of the things that are brilliantly happening in their minds and in their work in a way that should be very meaningful to all of us. Okay. Who should be listening to this because it's going to impact their future success?
If you're an automation engineer, aspiring automation engineer, an enterprise architect who wants to understand how to orchestrate all of these AI capabilities and tools together, if you're just someone who's curious about AI and wants to understand a lot of these concepts and terms better, my aim is for this podcast to be something that's teachable, that's actionable. We want to walk away with something that you can actually walk away with tangibly, and something that you're really learning from, right? Something that you're excited to learn from. It's not a product pitch. It's about this is how we view technology. This is how we view the future of work. And this is how that's being reflected in our product and what we talk about. So those are the big keys for me. I think that's really why you'd want to tune in. And I think who would probably enjoy this the most.
I have one final question. What's the big idea you want today's episode number 1 listeners to walk away from this episode with when it comes to APA?
Yeah, I think the big takeaway for me is that we are at the point where software solutions can think, act, and importantly, collaborate, not just execute things, right? It's not explicit instruction anymore. And agentic process automation unlocks this new way to design work where humans set direction, but intelligent systems actually carry out the execution. So my call to action would be if there's anything that you learned about during this podcast, maybe a phrase that was mentioned, we said APA, maybe that's new to you. We talked about MCP and A to A. If there's anything that you heard during this podcast, spend a moment this week to dig into that a little bit more. That's the way that I learn, right? I hear a conversation, I hear a phrase that's mentioned that maybe I'm not that familiar with. I pull on that thread a little bit to learn more, and that helps to give me a more well-rounded understanding of the concept as a whole.
I have a lot of threads to be pulling on, apparently. Lots to learn. Okay, well, we are at the close. We will be uploading this episode to YouTube and across major podcast platforms. So make sure you find us on whatever you like listening from and subscribe because you don't want to miss future episodes.
Excellent. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Agentic Edge podcast. If you found this episode valuable, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. It helps more people to find the show and stay on the edge of what's next in enterprise AI and automation. That's all for me, and we'll see you next time on Agentic Edge.